Have you ever done the right thing only to be punished for it? That's exactly what happened to Zariah Brooks, a 24-year-old black female mechanic who, despite her 6 years of experience, still found herself treated like an outsider in the very shop where her hands had kept engines alive. That day when she picked up the wrench to help a desperate biker, she had no idea her entire life was about to be flipped upside down. But sometime, life needs to fall apart before it can come together. The shop was buzzing, literally. Drills, compressors, the heavy rhythm of steel meeting steel. But in the center of it all, silence. Zariah stood still, her oil-streaked hands gripping the same wrench she had just used to fix a Harley Davidson in record time. Around her, 5 male colleagues avoided her gaze, pretending to be occupied. The tension was thick, the air tight, and the only real sound came from the grinding gears in the background. She looked straight into the face of her supervisor, Frank Delgado, who was practically foaming at the mouth. "I just helped a father get to the hospital to see his daughter," Zariah said calmly, her voice like velvet against the static of hostility. "Any decent person would have done the same." "Any decent person," Frank spat, "would have followed protocol. That tattooed thug could have robbed someone, assaulted someone, or worse. And you just decide to play Mother Teresa?" Zariah's stare didn't waver. She had heard those words before. In fact, she had lived them. She was the daughter of a cleaning lady and a school security guard. Two people who had spent their whole lives being judged by appearances. For Zariah, that judgment was constant. Being the only black woman in an all-white, all-male garage meant every screw she tightened came with suspicion. She was used to proving herself twice over, just to be considered average. But what none of them knew was this. Zariah didn't help that biker out of pity. She saw herself in him. 3 hours earlier, a man in a leather jacket had stormed into the garage, breathless and soaked in sweat. His Harley was stalled just a block away. He begged for help. His daughter had just been in a car crash. She was 8, in intensive care, and he had no other way to reach her. His hands shook as he showed a photo on his phone. A little girl with a gap-toothed grin, hooked up to machines. "I just need 15 minutes, he pleaded. "It's the ignition. That's all. Please." She's alone and scared. Zariah glanced around. Frank didn't even bother to look up from his customer. "We don't do walk-ins, especially not bikers." Another mechanic, Brent, added under his breath, "Those guys are trouble. Don't get involved." Everyone nodded like they were reading from the same cowardly script. But Zariah, she couldn't walk away. Not from that photo, not from that man's eyes. She made a choice. While Frank argued about part prices in the front office, she walked out the back, followed the man to his Harley, and did what none of the so-called experts would. In 13 minutes, she fixed the issue. Loose ignition wire, rookie level. The man's face crumpled in gratitude. "You saved my daughter," he whispered, squeezing her hand. "I'm Daniel. I won't forget this." He tried to pay her. She refused. "Just go be with your little girl." But when she returned to the shop, Frank was already waiting, and now he was threatening her job. "Don't think for a second you'll get a recommendation from me," he shouted. "I'll make damn sure no decent garage in this town hires you." Zariah stood at the threshold, her back straight, her eyes burning, not with tears but with defiance. "You think I'm afraid of being unemployed?" she said, each word as sharp as a blade. "I've been underestimated since the day I was born. I've been overlooked, talked down to, ignored. But today I'm proud of what I did." She looked around at her coworkers. "Every single one of you saw me get treated like trash, and you said nothing." Brent stared at the floor. Luis, who often relied on Zariah for the tough engine diagnostics, suddenly found the floor tiles fascinating. Marco, who had eaten lunch with her just 2 days ago, turned and walked away. Frank barked again, "Get out! And don't dream of coming back." She left without a word. But what none of them realized was that she was already writing the next chapter, and this time, she wouldn't be doing it quietly. Personal commentary. Stories like this always hit a nerve, because we've all seen it. The talented black woman who's punished for her brilliance. The hero who's gaslighted into thinking she's a problem. It's not just fiction, it happens every single day. But what gives this story power isn't just the injustice. It's how Zariah decides to fight back. In real life, the world doesn't hand you justice. You have to build it with your own hands. And sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage to light a fuse that burns down the entire system. That moment, that was Zariah helping Daniel. Now watch what she builds from the ashes. 3 days had passed since Zariah walked out of Delgado's auto repairs with nothing but a box of her tools and the dignity that her boss tried to strip from her. In a single afternoon, she had gone from the best mechanic in the shop to persona non grata across the entire city. That's how fast a whisper travels in the auto world, especially when it comes from someone like Frank Delgado. Every shop she visited turned her away. Some gave her fake smiles and excuses about no openings right now. Others didn't even pretend. One manager at Autotech, a place she had dreamed of working since she was a teenager, bluntly told her, "Frank already called. Said you had attitude problems. We don't want drama here." At the fifth shop, they didn't even let her finish her sentence. "We don't hire people with discipline issues," the receptionist said, folding her arms. Discipline issues. That's how they described helping a desperate father reach his daughter. It was maddening, but sadly, familiar. Zariah had grown up watching her mother, Marisol Brooks, face the same walls. Marisol had been a housekeeper at a corporate hotel downtown, one of the best. But she'd been fired after raising safety concerns. Zariah still remembered the night she found her mom sobbing over the raising safety concerns. Zariah still remembered the night she found her mom sobbing over the kitchen sink, framed for stealing a guest's wallet. The wallet was later found, left in the glove box of the guest's car, but the damage had already been done. "You got to be 3 times better to get half the credit," her mom had whispered that night, "but don't ever let them take your voice." That lesson stayed with Zariah, and now sitting in the tiny one-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother, surrounded by grease-stained overalls and a half-empty fridge, she decided she wouldn't be silent. While Frank was bragging to his golf buddies about putting the uppity girl in her place, Zariah was opening a file folder, one she had been quietly building for years. Inside were screenshots, audio clips, and detailed notes. Every racist joke Frank had made, every time he underpaid her, every time he humiliated customers who looked suspicious. This wasn't revenge. It was insurance. It was survival. She booted up her dusty laptop and started organizing. That's when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Zariah? It's Daniel, the guy with the Harley." His voice was different now, no longer panicked, calm, respectful, grateful. "Oh, hi, is your daughter okay?" "She's much better, thank you. But listen, I heard you got fired because of me. I'm really sorry." "It's not your fault," she replied quickly. "I made that choice. I'd do it again." There was a pause. "Still, I want to help. But first, there's something you need to know. About me. Can we meet?" Zariah raised an eyebrow. "Meet where?" "There's a cafe on Wilshire and 8th. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She hesitated, but something in his voice, earnest, almost trembling, nudged her to say yes. The next morning, Zariah wore her cleanest jacket and left early. She arrived to find Daniel already sitting at a corner booth, dressed not in biker leather, but in a crisp button-down shirt. No chains, no boots, just a man with tired eyes and forearms full of ink. He stood when he saw her. "Zariah, thank you for coming." She sat, wary but curious. "So, what did you want to tell me?" Daniel exhaled. "My full name is Daniel Morrison." Zariah blinked. "Morrison? As in Morrison Automotive Group. My father owns it." She sat back, stunned. Wait, you're telling me your dad is James Morrison? As in the guy whose face is on every auto repair magazine and billboard in this state?" "Yep, that guy." Zariah's mind reeled. "But you're a biker. You were broke. You said you didn't even have money to call a cab." "I'm also a dropout. At least that's what he called me," Daniel said, his voice dropping. "We had a falling out years ago. I wanted to ride, start my own small shop. He wanted me in suits, spreadsheets, and meetings. When I refused, he cut me off. I've been living independently ever since, working freelance, moving from job to job." Zariah leaned forward, still processing. And now your dad is negotiating a deal with Frank. Daniel nodded. That's why I called, because my father has no idea what Frank's really like. He only knows the version Frank presents. Clean floors, strict discipline, shiny smiles. But if he knew the truth, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Zariah opened her backpack and pulled out a folder. This is the truth. 6 years worth. Daniel stared at it like it was gold. And in many ways, it was. Audio clips of racist comments, screenshots of under-the-table wage theft, even logs of customers who had been turned away for being too rough-looking or suspicious. Daniel's jaw tightened. This could destroy him. I don't want destruction, Zariah said quietly. I want change. Daniel looked at her, long and hard. You're not just a good mechanic, Zariah. You're a leader. While Zariah and Daniel were quietly preparing a storm, Frank Delgado was celebrating like he had won the lottery. In his office, surrounded by beer bottles and ego, he was telling anyone who'd listen about how he cleaned house. That girl thought she could make decisions on my floor? Nope. I showed her who's boss. And now Morrison himself wants a deal with me. Me! He slammed his hand on the desk. People like her need to learn respect. But what Frank didn't know was that the very man he had insulted, the biker he dismissed as a tattooed thug, was sitting in James Morrison's office, telling him everything. Daniel showed his father the file. He explained the incident, the discrimination, the threats. At first, James said nothing, just stared at the folder. Then he spoke slowly. She saved your daughter? Daniel nodded. She saved me. James tapped the folder. And Frank fired her for that? Yes. The silence that followed was heavier than lead. Set up a meeting with her, James finally said. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I want to see her myself. Daniel smiled. Thank you, Dad. James didn't smile back. I'm not doing this as your father. I'm doing this as a businessman. If even half of this is true, then Frank Delgado just made the biggest mistake of his career. Personal commentary. I find this part of the story so satisfying because let's be honest, people like Frank, they count on their victims staying silent. They expect the world to let them keep winning. But when those victims organize, when they fight back with facts and truth, it's no longer just about survival. It becomes a revolution. And Zariah? She's not asking for pity. She's demanding justice with receipts. She's not burning bridges. She's building a freeway. Monday morning arrived like a storm wrapped in sunshine. Frank Delgado stood at the entrance of his workshop, chest puffed, collar stiff, new suit jacket catching the morning breeze. He had spent all weekend preparing. The shop was spotless. His crew, who had been sternly instructed to smile but not speak, stood in perfect formation by their workbenches. Today was the day James Morrison, automotive mogul, would finalize their partnership. What Frank didn't know, what he never could have imagined, was that the man he sought to impress had already seen behind the curtain. That the tattooed biker he humiliated was James Morrison's own son. And the woman he called a problem employee? She was about to walk back into this workshop with more power than he had ever dreamed of holding. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the lot. Frank straightened his tie and walked briskly to the door. Mr. Morrison, he beamed, opening his arms. Out stepped James Morrison, stoic, clean-cut, eyes sharper than any wrench on Frank's wall. Good morning, Mr. Delgado. He wasn't alone. Behind him stepped out Daniel Morrison, now dressed in a navy suit, tattoos peeking subtly from beneath his cuffs. And then Zariah. Hair pulled back, gray blazer, no oil stains, no grease, just poise, power, and purpose. Frank's grin collapsed. What is this? He stammered. James Morrison didn't smile. I'd like to introduce you to my legal team and your former employee, Zariah Brooks, who, as of today, is my new director of operations. Frank turned pale. No, this has to be a joke. Does this look like a joke to you? Daniel cut in, eyes burning. You looked me in the face and called me a tattooed bum. You refused to help me because of how I looked. while my daughter lay in a hospital bed. The other mechanics froze. James Morrison stepped forward. Frank, this meeting was never about a partnership. It was about seeing your real leadership style. And I did, firsthand. You bragged about firing a woman who helped save a child. You mocked her, called her emotional, said she had no future in this industry. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. But here's what you didn't know. Zariah documented everything. 6 years of racism, misogyny, wage theft, and customer mistreatment. We have voice memos, text logs, financial spreadsheets, and more than 24 witnesses ready to testify. A representative from the Labor Department stepped forward, folder in hand. Frank Delgado, she said, firm and clear, your business is being investigated for systematic discrimination and workplace violations. You are hereby notified that you are liable for civil penalties totaling over $300,000, and criminal liability is still being reviewed. Frank staggered back, eyes wide. Wait, this isn't fair. This is a setup. She was insubordinate. She was a human being, Zariah finally spoke, her voice calm and cutting. Something you refused to see. You mocked my background. You paid me less than the men I trained. You told customers I wasn't ready while I fixed the problems they caused. And worst of all, you taught an entire team that disrespect was normal. The workshop was silent. Then James delivered the final blow. This business, I'm buying it. Today, and Zariah will be running it. Effective immediately. The contracts were signed on the spot. Frank dropped into a chair, mouth hanging open. Daniel walked up to him, bent down and whispered, remember when you said she'd never work in this town again? Turns out, she'll be running it. 2 hours later, Frank was escorted out of the building carrying a cardboard box with his name hastily scribbled on it. No one said goodbye. No one clapped. No one even looked at him. His empire had crumbled. And the woman he tried to destroy? She was just getting started. Zariah didn't waste a second. By the following month, the shop had been reborn. She renamed it Brooks & Company, Auto Performance, the first black woman-led garage in the state. The floors? Still spotless. The work? Still precise. But the energy? Different. She hired 3 young female mechanics, 2 black, 1 Latina. She brought in 2 teen interns from local trade schools. She launched a scholarship program in honor of her mother, Marisol, for girls in low-income neighborhoods interested in STEM careers. Productivity shot up 40%. Customer reviews? 5 stars across the board. One review read, I came in for a transmission, left with hope and humanity restored. Even more powerful than the 5-star ratings were the quiet moments. Like when Paolo, one of the original mechanics, approached her with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, for being silent, for not standing up. You gave me a second chance, and I've never been more proud to work anywhere. Zariah nodded. Then help me make sure no one else ever feels how I did. Meanwhile, Frank Delgado's name became synonymous with workplace discrimination. He was blacklisted from the auto industry, sued multiple times, and eventually reduced to working as a junior mechanic at a rundown shop in the suburbs, under a black supervisor who refused to tolerate any form of bias. Karma doesn't knock. It lets itself in. James Morrison, humbled by the strength of his son and the brilliance of Zariah, stepped back from day-to-day operations. Daniel was now CEO of a new division focused on inclusive hiring and mechanic empowerment. And Zariah? She became a local icon. News outlets interviewed her, schools invited her to speak, mothers brought their daughters to the shop just to shake her hand. Her story became a case study at business schools, proof that dignity, when paired with action, doesn't just survive injustice. It transforms it. One day, Daniel's now recovered daughter ran into the shop with a handmade card. Auntie Zariah, she said, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. Zariah knelt down, eyes glistening. Then you're going to change the world. Personal commentary. I wish every story like this ended this way. I wish every woman who gets overlooked, talked down to, underpaid, fired, humiliated, could rise like Zariah did. But here's the deeper truth. She didn't rise because of her pain. She rose through it. She used it as fuel. She didn't get lucky. She got ready. And when her moment came, She turned the wrench that changed her whole life. Frank thought firing her was the end. It was just the ignition.